Our final presenter today, I have also gotten the opportunity to attend this Chelsea's classes as well. This is Chelsea Kundi. She is the owner of Building Blocks Family. Building Blocks Family creates loving family solutions by providing services for sleep, discipline, and potty training for ages 0 to 6 years old. Chelsea has her bachelor's of art in psychology and her master's in marriage and family therapy. Chelsea is also a certified infant and child sleep consultant. She works with families to build a strong and supportive foundation to help migrate through all life stages. So Chelsea, we're so glad to have you today. I'm going to pass it over to you. Remember, if you have any questions, toss them into the chat.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here tonight. I was like sitting up straight after the other Chelsea just talked. I was like, don't round my shoulders. I think that happens so much. That was so informative. So I am here tonight to talk all about infant sleep. And I know that this is always, a big topic because we want our sleep. And when we have those little babies, we just don't get it in the same way. And there's certain things that you can start to do in the very beginning where you will set the stage for success so that you will teach your kids good, healthy sleep skills. So hopefully you don't ever have to sleep train. If somebody comes to take my sleep soundly class, I have that online or in person in Phoenix. That's my goal, is that you never have to sleep train. So I want to give you a few like tips and tricks tonight of kind of where to start. And those first few weeks, so like the first 3 to 4 weeks, that is survival. Okay. You are going to bring this new baby in and you are healing and you are emotionally healing and sometimes you're physically healing, and that's just what it needs to be. You're going to just learn your baby and they're going to learn you. But you can start to put some things into practice, like trying to feed them every 2 to 3 hours during the day. We want to make sure that they're getting all their ounces in during that daylight time so that eventually they don't need to eat at night. Unfortunately, they're going to have to eat at night in the beginning, but if we can get into the habit of every 2 to 3 hours feeding them during the day, it's going to set them up to start to consume more of their ounces during the daytime. And we also want to teach them that daytime is daytime and nighttime is nighttime. And for those of you that have little ones, oftentimes those things are confused. And so, what does that mean? That means that your infant wants to sleep all day and they want to party all night. So, what is partying to them? That's just eating. And what we want to do is change that for them so that they eat more during the day, party more during the day, and they sleep more at night. Infants sleep, a lot anyways. When they're first born, every hour they're sort of going down for a nap, but we want to make sure that we're waking them up. Babies give us one long stretch in a 24-hour period. I do not want that one long stretch um, to be during the day. I want that to be at night when you're sleeping as well. And a really important principle is to lay your baby down awake. And I know that this is a really, really scary one because we don't want them to just wake up. But if babies don't know how to put themselves to sleep, they're going to be waking up in the middle of the night and they're going to be looking for whatever got them to sleep in the first place. So I don't think that you're going to put them down every single nap awake. They sleep every hour. Like I said, I'm a realist. I'm a mom. I have 2 young kids. I didn't do that either. But if you could think about, okay, for one nap a day, I'm going to lay them down awake. And at bedtime, I'm going to lay them down awake. You certainly can do it more than that, but start there. And once you see the magic of watching a baby put themselves to sleep, because it is magic. I mean, it is cool to watch. You're going to want to keep doing it. And it's those independent sleep skills that will get them to be able to sleep through the night. So practicing laying them down awake is really important. And we don't want to just wait for that to be at nighttime. Because if we hold them all day long and then at nighttime, we're like, give me your longest stretch just in a flat bassinet, they're not going to do that. They're going to want you to hold them. So set them up for success by practicing. When you get to about 2 to 3 months, and I don't know exactly how old everyone's babies are if you're pregnant, but kind of remember this. Once they're around that 2 to 3 month mark, we want to start to inch their way towards a 7 to 8 p.m. bedtime. That is their little sweet spot. And putting them down in between that time is going to help them to sleep a little bit longer, which will be nice. There are certain things that I really like to incorporate into sleeping, and some people call this sleep associations or a sleep prop. I do like less is more with sleep because remember, if you just teach them a skill set, you're not going to be as reliant upon a lot of these things. But I love a sound machine. So just white noise, not music, not not anything besides just kind of white noise. My favorite sound machine is the Hatch. And like Stephanie said, I work with toddlers too. So I'm always thinking down the line. The Hatch is a little bit more expensive. Typically retails for about $55, but it'll turn into a toddler clock and a night light later on. So it's like three for one. I love a good sleep sack or a swaddle, and I love a pacifier. Besides that, really like less is more with infants. The less that's associated with sleep, honestly, the better. And then you don't have to break things down the line. So those are kind of the sleep props that I liked. I know I'm seeing some questions come in, and I'll answer those in a second about one of the other ones. With safe sleep, too, just talking about that, you want to make sure that you lay your infants down on their back for the entire first year. Of course, during the day, practicing that tummy time and all that good stuff. But for sleep, you want to do on their back the entire first year. Nothing in the crib, nothing in the pack and play or bassinet, no bumpers, no mesh bumpers, no positioners, no docatots, no loungers, no blankets. If you use a sleep sack or a swaddle, you want to use one with a Velcro or a zipper for safe sleep. So I know that that is hard and different than obviously how we were all raised. But when we moved to Back is Best in the 90s, the risk of SIDS decreased by 50%. So that's pretty remarkable and crazy. And then I'm like such a talker, so I'm looking at the clock, Steph. So cut me off if I'm like talking too much. The last thing that I want to just discuss is this idea of pausing. And I love the book Bringing Up Bebe. I'm not going to tell you to go read a book because who has time for that? I'm going to summarize it for you guys. So it is all about this American mom raising her three kids over in France. And, it's like 92% of French kids sleep through the night by 10 weeks. And she was like, what are they doing? Well, they do this thing where they pause. And so when they lay their babies down, they wait before they intervene. They just wait and give them a few minutes and see what's going to happen. We so often jump in there. They're typically in our rooms in the beginning, and so it's hard to pause. We hear them stir, we hear them grunt. I cannot even handle how loud my babies were when I first brought them home. I was like, nobody prepared me for that. And so sometimes we get in there and we intervene and they're not even really awake, you guys. Sometimes they might be crying or grunting or stirring, but they're not really awake. So if you can pause before intervening so quickly, oftentimes babies will put themselves right back to sleep. And this whole idea of pausing and then intervening, pausing and then intervening is something that I teach. So it's not about letting a 2 week old cry it out. Of course not. But it's just about sometimes you might lay them down and they might be awake and okay and just wait and see. You might lay them down and they might kind of move and, groove around a little bit. Just wait and see. Sometimes that pause can really make all the difference, but it's hard at 2 in the morning. My go-to would always be like, shove that passy right in the middle of the night. And that's okay too. When they're right next to you, it's hard. But if you can pause and just wait and see as soon as they learn that skill to go between those sleep cycles and put himself back to sleep, it's really good. And that book is also really funny if you guys are interested in a book. I thought it was funny, but and just it's just good in general. Okay. Steph, is that good to start taking questions? Can I look at the chat?
Yeah, you're great, Chelsea, and I can pull some too. So I got a couple DM'd to me. So
Okay.
one is when does a baby start to need a nightlight, and when do you know when to use one?
Okay, perfect. So until about age 2, kiddos do not really feel or understand fear in that way. So it's typically at age 2, which it just feels like, wow, that's a really long time. But that's typically when it's going to start. That's when more nightmares and night terrors are going to start in toddlerhood. So before then, you do not need a nightlight. They don't need a nightlight until that point.
And Chelsea, if someone's using like blackout curtains, like should they stop using them at some point, or is it okay for that to always be used? Is that
That is totally okay to always be used. I mean, I like my room nice and dark when I'm sleeping too. But I'll say, like my 3-year-old, she's got a night light in there. I mean, she can see, it gets to the point our brains are so focused on dark, dark, dark when they're babies. And we should be like that. They sleep better in the dark. And then they get into toddlerhood. Toddlers are just kind of funny, and like they'll sleep with the whole lights on sometimes, so you can kind of let it go that way, but blackout curtains are just great in general.
awesome? All right, Chelsea, this is an earlier asked question when you were beginning your presentation. So this is, do you think this SNOO sets babies up for success long term? So like for after the 6 months that you're able to use it, or have you seen difficulty transitioning from the SNOO to the crib? And I apologize if I'm saying the name of the product wrong, but we all know what I'm talking about.
Nope, it's the SNOO. Yep, you're saying it perfectly. Um, yeah, I typically see the opposite. It's you're going to have to break them of the SNOO at some point, and most all of my clients, that use it, we have to break the babies of it. Now, that being said, it is probably helpful in the beginning for some people, but I always like to tell people the SNOO rocks your baby all night long. So it's just a machine doing it instead of you doing it. So when we're talking about them putting themselves to sleep on their own, in the SNOO, they're not doing that. They're getting rocked to sleep. So if you do use the SNOO, which I get for survival reasons, I want you to put it on the wean method as quickly as you can. And that wean method will only move the bassinet when the baby is upset. And then I would love for you to just turn it off as quick as you can. Remember, sort of going back to like less is more. I like to break my kids up as little things as possible. But you can always change and always break a behavior. So I don't hate it. It's just they're expensive and it's not something that I'm like, you have to have. But you can have good sleepers without it.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. And
Yes.
then Jacqueline wants to know any suggestions to transition baby from co-sleeping to crib?
Yes. So with co-sleeping, and I don't know how old this baby is because that really does make a little bit of a difference, because the older they are, the more aware they are of transitions, right? You probably see this with your babies, where they weren't very distracted when you were feeding when they were really little, but then 4 months hits and they're like looking all around. But anytime you're going to make a big transition with sleep, I think having a really good plan in place is key, because we need to have contingency plans, right? So like you could read a book and you're like, great, I'm going to go do that theory. But then what happens if, at 1 a.m. this happens, or at, 5 a.m. this happens? So I think having a really good plan in place is key, whether that's working with somebody or it is where you are like, okay, this is our plan at 2 a.m. This is going to be our plan. And I would, with the co-sleeping, set it up where you're going to start at bedtime, putting them in the crib, because bedtime sleep is easier than nap time sleep. And so let's set them up for success. And then I would tell you that once you rip that band-aid, don't backpedal, because if you give in and backpedal, then it's just going to be harder and harder each time. You can certainly slow play it where you're in the room and you slowly kind of back out of the room, but you just want to make sure that you're 2 feet in, jump 2 feet in. Um, but yeah, having a plan too. Sorry, hope that wasn't too wordy.
It's all helpful, Chelsea.
Like,
All
so
right,
yeah.
All right, a couple DM questions and then a couple that have been put into the chat. So one is, what is a good stretch of sleep for infants? And then how does that change as they grow older?
So a good rule of thumb is at 4 weeks, a baby that is healthy and developing in the right way, meaning like their growth curve is on the up and up, or they are typically capable of a 4-hour stretch. At 5 weeks, a 5-hour stretch. At 6 weeks, a 6-hour stretch, and so on and so forth. At 12 weeks, I would love for people to be getting an 8 to 12 hours consecutive stretch, if I were to like have you have a goal. Now, does every 6-week old give you a 6-hour stretch? No, they do not. But it's nice to know that rule of thumb. So if at 6 weeks you're like, oh, I'm still waking up every 2 hours, there's probably a few feeds you could merge together.
And Chelsea, that's the first sleep. Is that the first, like when they first go down?
Yeah, unless you're putting in a dream feed, which is one that you would initiate about 2 to 3 hours after their bedtime feed, then you could start the clock after that.
And then a question in the chat, Chelsea, should you transition baby from bassinet to crib at 3 months old? What is the best bassinet to use? And then a thank you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so the American Pediatrics, they recommend room sharing baby in their own sleep space up to 6 months. And then they also came out with the suggestion of room sharing for a year. And then they came out with research that showed that if you're still room sharing after 4 months, you're not sleeping as well, the baby's not sleeping as well. And there's actually no direct correlation to a decreased risk of SIDS at that point. That's a lot of information, but I always just want to give you sort of like, here's the textbook, and then I'm going to give you sort of my clinical opinion, and then I'll tell you subjectively what I did because I think that's helpful too. I think that that makes a lot of sense that at 4 months, babies developmentally change. They are very, very aware. And that makes sense to me that they're not going to sleep as well and you're not going to sleep as well. They smell their parents, whether it's breast milk or not. They know their parents. And so they know that you're there. Um, I think you want to check in. If you have a partner, you want to check in with your partner and say, okay, when do we want to move the baby? At 3 months, at 2 months, and have sort of like a check in point. You always want to ask your pediatrician. I work at a pediatrician's office, and all of them are like, we do not recommend the full 6 months. Even that's a long time if you don't want to do that. But I have plenty of clients who do. Subjectively, I moved my babies early against the recommendation, but I am really strict with safe sleep. And when I say early, I moved my first at 5 weeks, but I like rolled her bassinet into the nursery because the crib felt so overwhelming. It's not. It just first time mom. And then my second, we moved at like 3 weeks. That's just second kid problems. But for me, they were so loud. I already talked about that, so I'm not going to go in there. But I just remember like they would be sleeping and I would just be staring at them. I felt I could never kind of like shut off or relax. So just for us, it made a lot of sense. And I wanted my room back with my partner. And again, not just for sex, like you want to be able to just talk. We were whispering, sex might be good too, but just kind of for all the things. So I don't think that there's like a right or wrong age, but I would take in that information and make the choice as a family. So that was my part one. Part two to this question is, what's the best bassinet to use? So I hope I wasn't like boo-hooing on the snoo because so many people have it. So that's totally fine if you do. But my number one, the one that I really like is the Halo bassinet. And I use that one with Reese. So I always like to tell people ones that I use. The second thing that I would use too, like I'm not having any more kids, but if I were to have any more, is just the pack and play. You're going to want to pack and play anyways for travel. You're going to use a pack and play for a long time. It would be great to put that on your registry. It's smaller than a crib. It's portable. So I don't know. I think I would maybe use just a regular pack and play, but the Halo one I love.
That's awesome. Chelsea, you're so great. We got a DM question about swaddles. So just the question is, do you recommend swaddles? Do you think it's like different per child? Like some children are good with swaddles, some aren't. And then when do you stop using a swaddle?
Great question. So no, I'm not a stickler with swaddles. I do think some kids, I think a majority of kids really like a swaddle. Here's what I'm going to tell you is when you put that baby into a swaddle, don't feel like they're just supposed to be like, like this is so great. Sometimes you got to put them in it, shush and pat, offer them a passy, like get them used to it a little bit. The Love to Dream, I'm like crushing on the Love to Dream lately. This is what it looks like when they're in it. I get nothing from these companies. I love it because so many babies in your womb have their hands up like this. So I think it's just so genius. But the swaddles are great because babies have startle reflexes that do this, and will jar them awake, and that's super annoying. My oldest, she's 7 years old, and at the time, it was not recommended to swaddle. So I only swaddled her body, and her arms were out, and she just got used to her reflex. My youngest, I swaddled with her arms in, and then she rolled early. So then I had a breaker of it. But I think if it works for you and your baby, go for it and give it a few days to sort of try it before making like it's not going to work. Any signs of rolling during the day, you want to break them of their swaddle. So any signs you want to go ahead and break them of their swaddle. I like to do one arm in and one arm out for 3 to 4 days and nights, and then move both arms out and just swaddle the body. Oh yeah, see, someone said the four moms pack and play in bassinet. See, and then you have that pack and play, which is so great.
That's awesome, Chelsea. Thank you so much. Okay, so and I apologize if my screen is showing something different right now, guys. I clicked a button and now everything's gone. We have about 1 minute left of Chelsea's time. If there are any other questions, you can toss them into the chat. Again, if we don't have time to answer them right now, we will later. I'll just try and do a pause there in case anyone's trying to hit enter. Okay, we want to thank you so much, Chelsea, for being here today and answering all of those amazing questions. We put Chelsea's website into the chat. We've also put Chelsea's her website's in the chat. Also, a lot of moms have recommended some other products, a sound machine, a bassinet that they like. So make sure that you're checking out the chat as well for some mom-to-mom suggestions. So thanks again, Chelsea, so much. And thank you to all of our presenters. I'm going to